Ever looked at cybersecurity standards and frameworks and felt like, you needed a decoder ring just to understand all the acronyms? ISO, NIST, ISMS, CSF.
Oh, absolutely. It's like alphabet soup sometimes.
Yeah, it's easy to feel a bit lost trying to figure out which is which or, how they even fit together.
Definitely. And that's a real challenge for organizations trying to navigate this space today.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into. Today, we're tackling two of the heavyweights, ISO 27001 and the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, specifically the new CSF 2.0.
Right. And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to go straight to the source documents. We've got excerpts from ISO IX 27001.2022 and the NIST CSF 2.0 document. That's a NIST CSWP 29 from February 2024.
We want to pull out the really important nuggets, lay out what each one is actually for.
Exactly. What they're designed to do, their key features, and crucially, how they compare. Where do they overlap? Where are they different?
Think of us as your guides cutting through the jargon, trying to help you get the core ideas quickly. By the end of this, you should have a much, much clearer picture.
Yeah, a better feel for their distinct purposes and how they relate, or perhaps where they don't really relate at all.
Okay, so where should we start? Maybe with ISO 27001.
Sounds good. Let's start there. The 2022 edition, its full title actually tells you quite a bit. Information Security, Cybersecurity, and Privacy Protection. Information Security Management Systems Requirements.
Right, requirements, that word jumps out. And international standard.
Precisely. It signals its nature straight away. And the core idea, the central theme, is all about setting up, implementing, maintaining, and, importantly, continually improving an information security management system, an ISMS.
And the standard itself calls adopting an ISMS a strategic decision. That sounds pretty significant.
It is, and that decision is really aimed at preserving the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the good old CIA triad of information.
Making sure the right people see it, it's accurate, and it's there when you need it.
Exactly. And ISO 27001 aims to achieve this by applying a formal risk management process. It's about giving stakeholders, customers, partners, regulators, confidence that the organization is properly managing its information risks.
And it's not meant to be some separate security silo, right?
Yeah.
The standard says it should be integrated.
Spot on. It's intended to be part of the organization's overall processes and management structure, not bolted on the side.
Okay, so how is it structured? What are the key parts?
Well, the core structure involves clauses 4 through 10. This is where you find the actual requirements for the management system itself.
The must-dos.
Right. Things like understanding your organization and its context, leadership commitment, that's huge planning, which includes that critical risk assessment and treatment piece.
Support activities too, like resources, competence, awareness.
Yes, all that. Plus operation, performance evaluation, like monitoring, audits, management reviews, and of course, improvement, continual improvement.
And I noticed something really key in the source document about those clauses. You can't just pick and choose, can you?
No, absolutely not. If you want to claim conformity to ISO 27001, you cannot exclude any requirement from clauses 4 to 10. They are the non-negotiable foundation of the ISMS.
Okay, that really defines it as a standard with mandatory system elements. What about Annex A? That comes up a lot.
Yes, Annex A. Now, this is interesting. It's not requirements for the system structure like clauses 410, but it is normative.
Normative, meaning it's still a required part of the process.
Exactly. It's a required part of the standard's implementation process. Annex A provides a reference list of information security controls.
The controls, right. Things you actually do to protect information, and they're grouped, aren't they?
They are, grouped into organizational, people, physical, and technological controls. And they're derived from a companion standard, ISO 27002.
So how does it work in practice? You just pick the ones you like?
Not quite. Here's the insight. During your risk treatment process, that's back in Clause 6, when you're deciding how to manage your identified risks, you must compare the controls you've chosen against the list in Annex A.
Compare them. Why?
To verify that you haven't missed any necessary controls, it's a check. And if you decide not to implement a control from Annex A that might seem relevant, you have to formally justify why in something called a Statement of Applicability, or SOA.
Got it. So Annex A acts like a required checklist to make sure you've considered a comprehensive set of controls, even if you justify not using some.
Precisely. It forces that structured consideration.
And who is this standard for? Just big companies?
No, the requirements themselves are generic. They're designed to be applicable to any organization, regardless of type, size, or nature. But, and this is important, the organization has to define the specific scope of its ISMS.
So what parts of the business, what information, what systems are actually covered by this management system?
Exactly. You define the boundaries.
I think I saw a note about fitting in with other management systems.
You did. The 2022 version aligns with something called Annex SL. Think of it as a common blueprint for ISO management system standards.
Ah, so if you're doing ISO 9001 for quality or something for environmental management,
Right. This alignment makes it easier to potentially integrate them, maybe operate a single management system that meets multiple standard requirements. It helps avoid duplication.
okay, that gives us a really solid handle on ISO 27001. It's a formal requirements-based standard for an ISMS with mandatory clauses and a normative control reference list.
That's a good summary. Shall we shift gears to NIST CSF 2.0 now?
Let's do it. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework, version 2.0, released February 2024. How does the source describe this one?
Well, it's framed differently right from the start. It's described as guidance to manage cybersecurity risks, and it offers a taxonomy of high-level cybersecurity outcomes.
Outcomes, not requirements. That sounds like a key difference already.
It's fundamental. The purpose stated is to help any organization, again, broad applicability like ISO, regardless of size, sector, or maturity, to better understand, assess, prioritize, and crucially communicate its cybersecurity efforts.
Communicate. Interesting. And there was that line about how it doesn't prescribe how.
Yes, the NIST document is very explicit. The CSF does not prescribe how outcomes should be achieved.
Okay, so that feels very different from ISO's mandatory clauses and Annex A checklist. NIST seems more focused on the desired end state rather than the specific how.
That's absolutely spot on. It provides the structure for thinking about the what. The heart of the CSF is the CSF core.
The core, what's in that?
It's a hierarchy. Functions at the top, then categories, then subcategories. The functions are the big buckets. Govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover.
Ah, and I remember seeing that wheel diagram in the CSF 2.0 materials with govern right in the middle.
That visual is really key in 2.0. It emphasizes that govern isn't just another step. It underpins and informs how an organization implements the other 5 functions. It's about weaving cybersecurity into the wider organizational strategy and enterprise risk management.
Okay, so govern is central.
Yeah.
And the others? Identify, protect.
Identify is about understanding your assets, your environment, the risks. Protect is putting safeguards in place. Detect is finding cybersecurity events when they happen. Respond is taking action. And recover is restoring capabilities afterwards.
And these are outcome-focused, right? Like the example, assets are identified and managed. It's describing a result.
Exactly. And the document clarifies the order or size in diagrams, doesn't imply sequence or importance. They're just categories of outcomes.
So how do organizations actually use this core?
That's where organizational profiles come in. The CSF uses these profiles to help an organization describe its cybersecurity posture using the language of the core.
So you create a profile, like what?
You typically create a current profile where you are now and a target profile where you want to be. Comparing the two shows you the gaps.
Ah, I see. So it's a tool for assessment, gap analysis, and planning. That sounds pretty practical.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It helps you understand, tailor, assess, prioritize, and communicate.
And what about the tiers? I remember seeing those mentioned.
Right, the tiers. There are 4. Partial, risk-informed, repeatable, and adaptive. These aren't about specific controls, but rather they characterize the rigor and sophistication of an organization's cybersecurity risk management practices.
So like a maturity scale for your processes.
Kind of, yeah. It describes a progression from maybe informal reactive responses that's partial up to having formal risk-informed processes that are continuously improved and adapted that's adaptive. It helps gauge the maturity of your overall risk governance and management.
Okay, but if the core just gives outcomes and doesn't say how, where does the implementation guidance come from? Does NIST leave you hanging?
Not at all. This is another key aspect. NIST provides a whole ecosystem of online resources that complement the main CSF document.
Online resources, like what?
2 main types mentioned are informative references and implementation examples.
Informative references.
What are those? These map the CSF core outcomes, those functions, categories, subcategories, to specific sections in other existing standards, guidelines, and control catalogs.
Ooh, like mapping a CSF outcome to, say, a specific control in ISO 27001, or maybe something from NIST's own special publications like SP 853.
Exactly. SP 853 is mentioned, as is ISO 27001. So NIST points you towards these other detailed resources for the how. They also provide implementation examples, which are like short, practical illustrations of potential steps you could take to achieve an outcome.
And being online means they can be updated more easily, I suppose.
That's the idea. The cyber landscape changes fast, so having these online resources allows for more frequent updates than revising the core framework document itself.
So NIST gives you the flexible outcome framework and then points to a dynamic set of other resources, including standards like ISO for the specific implementation details.
That's a great way to put it. Flexibility and adaptability are central. It's designed for any organization, can be used voluntarily or mandated, and it's built to integrate with broader enterprise risk management or specific areas like privacy risk using the NIST privacy framework or supply chain risk, linking out to things like SP 800-161 on supply chain security.
Okay, wow. So we've looked at ISO 27001's requirements-based ISMS and NIST CSF 2.0's outcome-based framework. Let's really try to unpack the comparison now. Similarities first. Where do they align?
Well, the most fundamental similarity, I think, is they're both deeply rooted in managing risk.
Right. Information security risk for ISO, cybersecurity risk for NIST, but risk is the foundation.
Definitely. ISO requires a formal risk assessment and treatment process. NIST has risk assessment as a key category, IDR, and uses risk objectives within govern to drive priorities. So risk management is central to both, even if the mechanics differ a bit.
Okay, risk is common ground. What else?
Broad applicability. We saw that both are designed to be useful for all sorts of organizations, regardless of size or sector.
Yeah, ISO through its generic requirements and scoping, NIST through its flexibility and being explicitly designed for everyone.
Then there's the importance of governance and leadership.
Yes. ISO has that whole Clause 5 dedicated to top management commitment.
And NIST 2.0 put govern right in the center, emphasizing how it integrates cybersecurity into the overall organization and URM. So leadership buy-in and strategic alignment are key in both worlds.
Makes sense. Anything else on the similarity front?
The emphasis on improvement, continual improvement.
Right. ISO has Clause 10, specifically for that, driving improvement from audits, reviews, nonconformities.
And NIST talks about improvement through the tiers, aiming for adaptive, and the whole cyclical process of using profiles. Assess current, define target, identify gaps, improve, repeat.
Okay, so risk-based, broadly applicable, focus on governance, and emphasis on improvement. Those are solid points of connection. Now, the difference is, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. What's the absolute core difference in what they are?
The core difference is really their fundamental nature. ISO 27001 is an international standard. It lays down requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and improving a formal information security management system. It's about the system itself.
A defined, auditable system.
Exactly. NIST CSF 2.0, on the other hand, is a voluntary framework. It provides a taxonomy, a classification of desired outcomes for managing cybersecurity risk. It's a common language and structure for thinking about and communicating risk posture.
Framework of outcomes versus a standard for a management system. Got it. And that leads directly to the next difference, doesn't it? Prescriptiveness.
It does. Because ISO 27001 defines the required elements of the system, clauses 410, it's inherently more prescriptive about what processes and structures you must have in place. Plus, it gives you that normative Annex A control list you have to reference.
Whereas NIST.
NIST CSF 2.0 explicitly states it is not prescriptive about how you achieve the outcomes. It defines the what the desired result and leaves the how flexible, pointing to those external informative references for implementation guidance.
So ISO says you must build your car this way and consider using these specific approved parts, while NIST says your goal is to get from A to B safely and efficiently. Here are some maps and suggested types of vehicles you could use.
Huh. That's actually a pretty good analogy. Yeah. And that difference carries through to how controls are handled.
How so?
ISO's Annex A is that specific normative list. You must compare against it and justify exclusions formally if you want to conform to the standard. NIST points to a much broader, evolving set of online resources, informative references, implementation examples. These are suggestions, pointers, not a single mandatory list tied directly to adopting the framework itself.
Different approaches to guiding the how. Okay, difference number 4.
Conformity and certification. This follows naturally. ISO 27001, being a requirements standard, is structured specifically to be auditable. Organizations commonly seek formal third-party certification to prove their ISMS conforms to the standard.
You get a certificate saying you meet ISO 27001 requirements.
Right. The NIST CSF document, being a voluntary guidance framework, doesn't talk about formal certification in the same way. The tiers describe rigor and maturity, which is useful for self-assessment or communicating with partners, but they aren't presented as formal certification levels you achieve for the framework itself.
So you wouldn't typically get NIST CSF certified in the same way you get ISO 27001 certified.
Not based on the core CSF document itself, no.
Okay. And one last difference. You mentioned some unique tools in NIST.
Yes, the fifth difference lies in some of the specific tools NIST provides. The profiles current, target, even community profiles mentioned in the docs are designed specifically to help organizations describe their posture and prioritize actions. And the tiers provide that specific language for characterizing the maturity or rigor of their risk management practices.
While ISO has things like internal audits and management reviews for assessment.
Correct. Those serve vital assessment purposes within the ISMS, but the specific structures of profiles and tiers are distinct tools offered by the NIST framework.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of the contrasts.
Yeah.
So let's bring it home. What are the practical takeaways for someone listening? How should you think about these two?
Well, think of ISO 27001 as providing the detailed blueprint and the required structural components for building a robust, systematic, and potentially certifiable information security management system. It's about the formal processes, the governance, the repeatable structure for managing security.
The engine and chassis, maybe? The core operational system.
Yeah, that works. And think of NIST CSF 2.0 as providing a highly flexible, outcome-focused language and toolkit. It helps you understand your current state, define where you want to go, communicate about risk effectively, and prioritize your efforts. It's designed to adapt and integrate with your broader business context.
More like the navigation system and the dashboard, showing
Yeah.
you where you are, where you're going, and key risk indicators.
I like that. Engine and chassis, ISO, navigation, and dashboard NIST. And crucially, they aren't mutually exclusive. They can absolutely work together.
How so? The NIST document even mentions ISO, right?
It does. NIST CSF explicitly lists standards like ISO 2701 as informative references. This means you can absolutely use the processes and controls defined within an ISO 27001 ISMS as how you achieve the desired outcomes described in the NIST CSF core.
Ah, so you could use NIST profiles to figure out your priorities and target outcomes based on your specific risks.
And then use the structured approach of ISO 27001, including its risk assessment process and Annex A controls, as the way you actually build the capabilities to meet those targets.
Or flipping it, if you already have a certified ISO 27001 ISMS, you could probably use the NIST CSF language and structure to better communicate your security posture and how your existing system addresses those key cybersecurity outcomes.
Precisely. They offer different lenses and tools for tackling the same fundamental challenge: managing security risk effectively in a way that makes sense for the organization.
Okay, so we've really dug into the core of both ISO 27001.2022 and NIST CSF 2.0. We've looked at the sources, pulled out what they are, how they're structured, and really highlighted those key similarities and, maybe more importantly, the differences.
And hopefully understanding these two approaches, the management system standard versus the outcome-based framework, gives you, the listener, some powerful tools for thinking about security in your own context. Whether you need that formal certifiable system or a flexible way to understand and communicate risk posture, or maybe both.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over. If ISO 27001 gives you that strong engine and chassis for your security program, and NIST CSF 2.0 provides the smart navigation and clear dashboard, how could you strategically combine elements of both to create a security program that's not just resilient and well-managed, but also clearly understood, easily communicated, and truly adaptive to the specific cyber risks you face?